Unless someone's got a pocket full of cash. So I just realized that entire recording, the microphone wasn't on, so nobody at home was hearing us. But it just shows that everybody at home was really paying attention because we just now heard that we didn't have a microphone on. So
Thank you.
thank you. You're welcome. So those at home that are actually listening to these, we were talking about that if you went to a walkthrough and there was damage done and you don't have time for someone to get out and get the assessment, like what would you, how do you figure out how much credit to ask for? Usually this is when my phone starts ringing off the hook, just to let you know.
So I agree with Terry, if you didn't do a home inspection, like make sure you get in there before the closing table and before the final walkthrough. I guess you'd have to take some type of like guesstimate and have everybody agree to maybe holding an escrow for any of the repairs that need to be done. I don't know. I'm dying to hear Heather's answer. But
Do it the old-fashioned way. Don't close.
yeah, close.
So that was going to be my answer. So say that again.
So the 2 allowed walkthroughs that are in
Yes.
the contract, does that include the final walkthrough?
Yes, your 2. So when you go under contract in the house, you have 2 walkthroughs. You have one anytime, and then, well, I mean, really both of them can be anytime, but a lot of people automatically think like, oh, I'm gonna get in the house twice, and then I have my final walkthrough. You're allowed to enter that house other than your day of inspections twice prior to closing, whenever that is. And that is something that people call all the time. Oh, I went in for measurements. It was a walkthrough. Well, we didn't ask any questions. You still walked through the house. I don't care what you were doing. If you were walking and you were in the house, it is a walkthrough.
So the inspection doesn't count towards that?
The inspection does not count towards your walkthroughs because it's inspections and then you have two
But the
walkthroughs.
final walkthrough does count.
But your final walkthrough, yes. So make sure that you keep that time allotted if you're going to go through the walkthrough. But I do agree with making sure, so this way, the more you find out prior to closing, especially if you have not been in that house in so long, go, 10 days prior to closing. We would like to do a walkthrough, and then I always do mine an hour prior. A lot of people do them on the night before. I don't necessarily agree the night before. A lot can happen overnight. A fire can happen, a flood can happen. They can go in and vandalize the house overnight. A lot can happen. I go in literally on my way to closing. My broker answer, we're gonna go with that one since we're recording. Escrows, yes, escrow. If you don't know how much to escrow, like if you can't send a picture to a contractor and say, hey, can you give me like a ballpark figure on what to do? And if their ballpark figure is $5,000, I'm escrowing like 12.5, 1.5 times. Like I am absolutely, or like 2.5 times, like I am going ridiculously over. And then just make sure your escrow is filled out. You don't ever have to send us an email. I get an email all the time. Can we hold escrow? Yes, the answer is yes. We will hold escrow. As long as you have an escrow agreement, we will hold escrow. But if you do not have time for a contractor to come out to give you an actual quote, don't settle. Like if your closing's at 10 o'clock in the morning, bump it to the last closing of the day if you can get somebody out that day. If not, extend. And if the parties don't agree to extend, then they're in default off of that the home should have been kept in, or the maintenance of the house, that, that paragraph, because it was not.
So what's the escrow agreement?
There's an actual escrow agreement form. I'm not going to go into the details on that because it has nothing to do with like this class, but it literally says escrow agreement, and it says how much you're holding, who's holding it, what the reason's for, and how you're, who upon release, who's getting it back. It's all pretty much spelled out.
So I have a question about that. Not the agreement, but so I had it. I'm under contract right now, and the buyers are buying the home with inspections, but they waive the negotiation period. So
Okay.
they had 10 days to inspect it. They inspected everything. They're happy. But during the oil tank inspection, like a oil heater inspection, everything came normal, but the water holding tank leaked during.
Uh-huh.
So the listing agent, when I sent her the report, said, hey, we're gonna fix it. We're gonna replace it because it says it needs to be replaced. So she took it upon herself to replace it. So what would be a good time to just go check on that and use my first walkthrough? So should I coordinate with her, say, hey, is it done, or so how should I?
So the way, so even just like, so all of my reply to inspections, I put in there, like, so the top part of it is that the sellers must have the repairs done X amount of days prior to closing. Make sure you read that correctly, because some people think that it states that that's how many days they have to do the actual repairs, but it's not. It's how many days prior to closing that they have to do those repairs. So if I have that they have up till 10 days prior to closing to do the repairs, I'm gonna schedule my first walkthrough at that 10-day prior.
But I don't have anything in writing.
So if you don't have anything in writing, and then, so my second part to that is regardless, like if I want them to send me documentation with everything, and it states that in there that everything, all documentation should be sent to the buyer and the buyer's agent. So as soon as I have if I ask for 10 different things on there and I have documentation that all 10 things were done, I'm gonna schedule my first inspection, my first walkthrough at that point. The further out from inspection from closing you are, the better, because you have more time to jump through hoops if you need to, rather than like on that 10th day. As soon as it is done, I'm scheduling something out. So if you know that it's done and you have documentation that it's done, schedule to go out.
So but then should I just write it? So our time to terminate expires tomorrow. We have the report.
Oh, you're still in termination and they're doing this? That's a whole different ballpark. So that is like, that's such an odd situation that is like, shouldn't even really be a thing. Because your buyers did an inspection but waived all rights towards the inspection, correct?
No, they waived the rights. Inspections was elected, but negotiation period was showing 0.
So no credits or anything.
No
So they
credit.
couldn't ask for credits or anything like that. So they can't walk away if something's wrong on this anyway. So it doesn't make a difference.
Right, but so like, going back to the point, like I wanna wrap my head. So do I have to get anything in writing? She told me, hey, I'm gonna fix it.
Anything that they're doing repairs from, and this is outside of buyer's reply to inspections anyway, from the day you go under contract to the day you go to closing, the seller must keep that house, must maintain that house in the order that it was when the buyer saw it.
Yeah.
So if anything fails from the day you go under contract to the day of closing, and something is repaired, they have to send you documentation, regardless. You shouldn't even have to request it. Now, the other agent probably won't just send it over to you, but yes, you want to make sure that
Okay.
they send it over, or you can absolutely, find something out that there was $100,000 worth of damage in a house and they never told you. But yes, they have to send you over all of the documentations they have. It has to be disclosed. So remember, they have to maintain the property. If something fails, they have to come back to you and say that this failed. The buyer can either accept as is, they're going to offer a credit, or offer to repair it.
Regardless of the inspection.
Regardless of inspections or not. And this is where people get tripped up if they're buying the house as is. As is means that you're buying the house as is the day that you saw the property. Not, I don't care what happened, all of this stuff happened that you decide that you're buying it as is. No, it was not that way when you walked through the house. They have to, as is, day that you saw the house, maintain it from that point to make sure that nothing else fails further. If they do, they have to send you some type of documentation.
So then I'm just gonna say, hey, when do you guys are planning to repair the tank? I mean, the replace, and that's when we wanna have our first walkthrough once you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for something like a tank that small, if they're sending you something, if they're replacing the tank or having it repaired and they're sending you over, there's a guarantee and there's a water, and they send you a picture of a new hot water holding tank, I'm not gonna waste a walkthrough on something that you have a picture of
Okay.
on there. Like, what are you gonna go in and look at the same thing that's on the picture? Like, I wouldn't waste a walkthrough for that. If it was like, oh, we're replacing hardwood floors and you wanna make sure they did them correctly, you can't really see in pictures, that would be different. But if they're sending you a picture of a new tank there and you have documentation that says the new tank was put on this date, good enough in my book. What do you guys think on that? That's just my lazy Heatherness in there. I'm not going to the house unless I have
Picture and
to.
the documentation, I wouldn't waste the walkthrough.
So back to the negotiations. How do you negotiate out buyer reply to inspection. I'm gonna give all my like tips, so I hope that you guys are never on the other end if I have a buyer now.
So, one is, you start educating the buyer throughout the process of looking at homes, and you have to set up their expectations. And like in the market that we're in now, the expectation is, well, you have to, do inspections for informational purposes only. But when we're in a strong buyer's market, you have to say, that the seller's gonna expect a repair list. And this, what you mentioned before, if you ask for 50 things and all the small things, that's what the seller's gonna pick and choose. And it is a negotiation, and sometimes it gets heated and long and crazy. So you ask for the most important things. Just the most important things.
I agree. And then also coming down to the date, because a lot of people are like, oh, you're on day 10. No, your negotiation period was up yesterday, or this was up yesterday. Send your dates out the day that you go under contract, send them to the other agent and say, do you agree with these dates? You have it in an email that everyone agrees, like, nothing's a problem until there's a problem. So why everybody's getting along, get everything. I'm like, oh yeah, this is the date we all agree on, because people don't read that part of the contract where it says that it starts the day after
Do you
everyone
confirm
signs.
that whether you're on the buyer or the seller side?
Yes,
You send that letter out, that email out?
yes, and by me, I mean Caleb is wonderful.
Yeah.
But yes, I used to anyway. I used to have my own template that I did prior. So when I talk to my buyers, this is how I do it. So we all go to the inspection together. I tell them, obviously when we're there, what were your biggest concerns? As we're going through, like sometimes I'm like, oh, just saw that on the 10 other inspections I've been on this week. What's your biggest concerns there? Just so I know. And then I say, okay, keep that in mind. You're gonna get the inspection report by, and that's when I call my like inspector around. When are we getting this inspection report? We're gonna get that by, tomorrow at noon. Sit down when you get home from work, take a look at it, write down the things that are absolutely deal breakers. That if they said no, that you would walk away. If it's something that you can think, or something that's like, let's throw it on there and we'll see what happens. If we get it, great, but not, I'm okay to, play that game too, unless we have a bunch of non-negotiables. If we have a bunch of non-negotiables, we're going to focus on that. But write down your non-negotiable items and then write down your, if we can, it would be great list. I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna have my list. Then we're gonna compare our list. If it's on both of our lists, it's going on the reply to inspection no matter what. If it's, I have something on my list, this is where they all love me. I'm gonna explain to you why I'm right and my reasoning on why I think we should ask for this item, but I wanna hear why that wasn't important to you. And it could just be something that they overlooked, where I'm like, they're gonna come back to me and hate me later on if I let them go to the settlement table with this wrong. Or if you have something on your list that I don't have on my list, I want to hear your reasoning of why you want to ask for it. And I'll explain my reason of why I didn't think we should ask for it. If I agree with them, then we put it on. And if not, like if we're going back and forth, and it could be something like so simple where it could be like, well, I knew that the township's gonna, require that or something along those lines. So I have my list, they have their list, and then we do our reply to inspections together. When I send it over to the other agent, I call the agent. Here's my little, if you're ever on the seller side, guys, good luck working with Heather. No, I'm just kidding. I will call you and scare the shit out of you the day of inspections. Like I'm calling it like, oh my God, this was wrong. This was wrong. This was wrong. This was wrong. I'm really gonna, try to keep my buyer in. So you're gonna call your sellers and be like, all of this stuff was wrong. And now they're panicking. So when I come back with 3 things, it's a relief. Oh, we'll do that. We thought you were gonna come back with so much more. Like I just scared the shit out of you. Yes. So I went to Penn State for psychology before I was a realtor. So yes, a lot of reverse psychology happening in my world. So I will.
Apparently you're not a Vulcan. Vulcans never bluff.
So no. So I will go and I will only say the major things. Like if it's like little things like this was wrong, where I'm not lying, I'm telling you the things that were wrong, but I didn't tell you we were gonna ask for them. But I'm gonna tell you all this because the sellers, as soon as they're done, are gonna be calling their agent saying, how did the inspection go? The only thing they have to go off of are the things that you told them. The roof's failing, the heater's failing, this is failing. And then when we come in, they're like, oh, I thought you were gonna ask for this other stuff. So then that's my angle. Look, my buyer is willing to do X, Y, and Z, which is going to cost them a big penny. In order for us to keep this together, we need your seller to pitch in and do this, that, and the other thing. Like, these are the 10 things that they are going to ask for. These are the things that they're already willing to take off their plate if your seller is willing to do these things. Go that direction. Now, I do the same thing. So I go back and forth between asking for a credit or asking for repairs, because I don't want it to be this seller that just hired their, nephew who's been in the plumbing business for 36 seconds. And they weren't a plumber until the reply to inspection came back. And now all of a sudden it's going to be fixed on some fake letterhead. And great. If it's something like small where it's like, okay, we can take care of this. But if it's something major, I will so if you guys actually read your reply to inspections, you can say who you want the work to be done by also. So you can submit your reply to inspections with quotes and say, like, if it's a roof, like, I want this roofer. Sometimes I'll say, you guys pick a roofer to go out, I'll pick a roofer to go out, and let's compare their reports. If they're equal, I don't really care which one. Now, if you're like, I just had this, I had masonry work on one of my listings that needs to be done. I had some guy that came out and wanted $8,400 worth of work. He said needs to be done. Another guy came out the other day and his quote was $300. Where were we wrong, guys? So now we have number 3 going out today, because they were where if it was like $8,400 and the other one came back at like $7,000, like it might have just been, a labor thing. But that's a hell of a gap, guys, to like go off of. And clearly one was working for one side and one was working for the other. Actually, I just don't think that one spoke English and didn't know what we were asking for, but but when I send people out, if it's something major, I am more likely to ask for a credit, as long as it's within the credit parameters that you can, or say, look, we want the roof completed by this company. Can it be paid on the settlement sheet, and we'll schedule for the work after closing? So this way they know that the money is not going in my buyer's pocket. They know that it's truly going to the roofing company or whatever it may be, and the work is being done after closing, because that is open-ended amount of credits at that point. A lot of people block themselves in that 3% or 6% credit. I would rather pay the work off the sheet, on the sheet, and have it done correctly. Somebody had hands. Both these.
Does a quote count as a walkthrough? If you're sending a contractor out, does that count as one?
Nope. So in there it says other than inspectors or contractors.
Okay.
But you're not going through with all of these contractors. Your buyer is not saying, oh, I'm sending a heater, and while I'm there, I'm doing all of this other thing. And that's a big misconception too. Contractors are fully capable of walking in a house and giving a quote without you there.
Oh, so if this is a buyer's agent, I can, because I have the same thing with my buyer's limited, so they can send a contractor.
They can send a contractor. You can go.
I can go.
The buyers don't need to be, you, the buyer, the grandfather, and their 6 kids don't all need to be there for a contractor. Contractors, I say agent and contractor. Because if not, if the buyers are there, it's a walkthrough. They're walking through.
So I had a big credit that was needed for structural repair. And it was over the 3% that was allowed. And we did a combination of reduction of the sale price and the maximum credit.
So I have done that before. I think I work, no offense if any of my past buyers are agents now on this call. I tend to not work with buyers that have money. So reducing the sale amount to them does nothing for them. So if I reduce, $10,000, they're not getting that $10,000 to help them with that repair. So that's why I always pay the contractor on the sheet, because then at least it's getting done where it helps them with the money. If I have somebody that's bringing, $80,000 to the table and, $10,000 and it's still going to put money in their pocket, then I will do a reduction on that point. But generally I try to either do the credit or.
Heather,
Stunning.
what's your concern with, you said that's considered a walkthrough if your buyers show up with the contractor. What's your concern there?
When you go to do your final walkthrough and the other agent says, well, you already did your 2 walkthroughs and now you can't get back in the house. So be very careful with walkthroughs. I've been seeing that a lot more and more. These are like little, I don't want to say petty things I keep getting calls off of, but let me tell you, I've never felt like a babysitter before until this shitty market as a broker, where they're like, well, they already came through the house twice. They came through with Joe, the heater guy, and they came through this. So now that they're not, we don't have to let them in for a final walkthrough because they already came through twice. And technically they're right. That if you go in that house twice, that's your walkthrough.
What about exterior of the house?
Exterior, as long as you have permission, you're not walking through. So that is allowed. Generally, how I do it is I am a big cover your ass, put it in writing. So I will send an email and say, can we bring this inspector, or not inspector, can we bring this contractor through on this date, on this date? If we go through, can, we not have it count towards one of our walkthroughs? We would like this in addition to the contract 2 walkthroughs. Like I'm just asking to be nice now.
Yeah, I guess that was my point, because I've always, there are buyers that just want to be there with the vendor, with the contractor.
Yeah.
So as long as you communicate that really with the other agent, just say, hey, look, the buyer wants to be here. This is
Yeah,
normal.
in writing though, because I just had that call. I don't know if it was last week or the week before where they said yes, and they specified that it did not want to count towards their walkthrough in conversation. And they still were like, nope, but that was your 2 walkthrough, because they said every time they came through with a contractor, they found something else wrong with the house. So they didn't want them in the house anymore. And that was their way around that, yep, we said that it wasn't going to count, but now user basically being bulls and we want to be that back. So
Have a paper trail.
have a paper trail, always. I love paper trails. Yes.
So in regards to paying the contractor on the settlement sheet, if it's something that can be repaired right away, that's good. But I did that last November and I represented the buyer and we agreed to pay the vendor, and the title company held the check until the work was done. And it was concrete work that was required by Warminster Township. And the contractor had major surgery, had a leg amputated, and wasn't able to do the work until the weather got better in the spring. And
Without a leg?
well, yeah, and then, yeah, without a leg, but then he didn't do the business anymore. So, we had to find another contractor in the spring, and now none of the prices were the same.
Okay. Wow. I've never had a concrete amputee phone call before. But if that were to be thrown at me, okay. So the way I usually do it too is if I'm paying like a contractor on the sheet, I'm making sure it's a legit company where they don't just have one-legged man working for them. And I would hope that somebody else would be able to go out and do the work from the same company. If it's like a one-man job, then I don't know how much but I would want like a team that he should have been able to have somebody else come out and complete it because that was his quote. And technically if they're paid and he agreed and gave that quote and he wasn't able to go off of it, that could have been a whole nother suit in itself. So I would say make sure it's a legit company that has multiple employees or at least multiple legs.
But this was, again, this was who the seller wanted to use. And
oh, I don't let the sellers choose either. So if I'm paying a contractor, all right, so Heather's life is like Heather's way or no way. I'm really not that bad to work with. I'm just kidding, kind of, sort of. I have to do multiple. The seller's not calling the shots on this for everything. I represent the buyers. So if I am doing what's best, like I want to make sure, again, because if I would have just went out there and had the 8,400 versus the 300, we would have had $300 paid on a sheet. That's why I get multiple. And if we need, you know, multiple, okay, if they're near each other, great. Now the buyers can choose who's getting paid on the sheet. If the sellers say, well, my guy was 7,000, your guy was 8,000, we're only willing to pay that 7, great, pay the 7. If my buyers really want to use their guy that bad, they're going to pay the extra 1,000. If you want this 100% paid, then you're going to have to pay, you know, go with who the seller did. Or if they're too far apart, let's get a mutual third party out, and that is like the deal breaker, and we'll come kind of in between.
Right. The situation though, this wasn't something the buyer asked for. This was part of the UNO.
The township. So the, okay, so the, yeah, so the sellers do get to do it.
Yep.
And they go back. So for use and occupancies, I never pay the person on the sheet. I always just hold escrow open-ended.
Yeah.
So if I have, how much was it, for example?
I don't know, $600.
So if it was $600, I probably would have held about $1,500 in escrow for the company to come out. And if it wasn't done within, you know, 60 days, then the buyers, you know, get to choose who they want, and they get the full 1,500 to do whatever they want. Outside of that, if the sellers people come out and want to get paid, great, they want to get paid. But if not, then that money can go to anybody as long as it's a
Do the
contractor.
contractors get paid up front, or does that, like, how does that work if they want a deposit or for work that?
So
that's on the
generally,
sheet?
So generally the way I do it, if it's on the sheet, is I will have the buyers, like I explained to the contractors up front, look, we're gonna have you paid on the sheet. We're gonna schedule it, but if you want to deposit, then you're gonna have to, you know, wait for it. I've never had someone push back and say like, oh, we're not gonna wait for it. Like they might say like, okay, well, in order for us, we're not gonna order material until we have a deposit. Great, we'll give you a deposit the day after, you know, closing, and it's already scheduled out prior
The
to
title
them.
company handles
I usually have the title company. I actually don't ever ask the title company to hold anything. I personally will just hold the check for the contractor until the work's done, and then I'll give them the check for it.
What do you do if you have to give them a deposit? What do you do with that check?
It's up to the buyers
Oh, to put the money.
to give the deposit, yeah. I know how they're going to do it at that point. I've never had a problem where someone's like, nope, I absolutely want the deposit. I'm like, look, I literally have a check here with your name on it. Do you want the job or not? Because if not, I'll hire somebody else. But I don't play too many, like, oh, we're gonna make this a lot harder than it needs to be. You want your money or you don't. Once I start negotiating with the other agent though, on the other side, once I write my reply to inspection up and I say, okay, this was this was this, I always remind them that on the last page of that seller's disclosure that the inspection report now needs to be disclosed. So like if, okay, your roof is shot, my buyers aren't gonna be the only ones that are going to know that you need a new roof. Any buyer that comes in is going to need a new roof. They're going to see this inspection report. So if this inspection report looks horrific and we're down to like 5 things, every buyer that walks through the door has a right to this inspection report. Now, you can't hide it. You'll be sued for non-disclosure. It literally says you must update the seller's property disclosure or make the property disclosure available to the new buyers. Becomes part of it. So you're disclosing. So if you think you're going to go out there and get a cash buyer that's going to look past everything that's on this inspection report, good luck to you. But these major ticket items they're going to ask for, I'm coming to you.
And I've used that even in this seller's market when we did inspections for informational purposes only, and then found asbestos insulated pipes in the basement. And I said, well, we're asking them to remove it, even though we waived our inspection, because if you walk, they have to disclose that now. So chances are they're going to fix it. And they did. So
I've used that a few times too, but that's also why on the seller side, I won't accept it for informational purposes only, because I know you're going to come back and get me anyway. But yeah.
Yeah, so what do you do? It's sort of like you just decline it altogether?
No, I'm going to just call you and be like, okay, well, if you come, you know, don't, if you're doing inspections, I tell my people that they're gonna come back and ask for something. Unless they're absolutely waiving, automatically think that they're gonna come back and they have the right to. That line means nothing. And it means nothing in court because it is open, all in perception. What was for informational for you is not information to me. That was not information, that was a shock to me. It's not worth the stuff that I've heard in the past
Oh,
year.
one question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's sorry. So what I was gonna ask you said the roof, right? So I had this situation when the roof was very old, so it was in bad shape. But from inside of the roof, there were no leaks. So when I said, hey, there's so many things, I said, this is wrong. We don't want any of this, but this is a big problem. And so the seller's agent said, hey, but then it's not leaking. So technically they've lived through it and they were gonna live through it for many more years. So how would you handle that conversation if you were on the buyer's side?
So if I was on the buyer side and they said that it's not leaking,
It's not leaking, yeah, but.
great. I always say, do you wait for it to review, like replace your roof when it's leaking? Like, do you wait for there to be an issue? Do you prevent the issue? Do you not get your oil change and just wait for your motor to like give it out on you as you're driving? But I go back to, okay, it says at the end of the life expectancy,
Oh, yeah.
and every buyer that walks through the door is gonna say that same thing and ask for the same thing.
Yeah, they did.
All you can do is
but-
ask.
Yeah, but I was just wondering how.
Yeah, I always just go back to like every other buyer's gonna see exactly what my buyer saw.
So moving into a new market like we are now, coming from a market where it's like, here you go, here's my offer, here's everything you want, here, we want the house. When you're negotiating inspections, what happens when you're in still a competitive, on a competitive house? So there are multiple offers, there are interested other parties. You get through inspections, you go back, you find a ton of stuff wrong. You go in and the sellers don't want to do anything still at that point.
So it's up to the buyer then if they wanna walk away. You can't force a buyer to ever do anything.
The
You
seller-
can't
yeah.
force a buyer to move forward, and you can't force a seller to do anything. You can't force a seller to ever agree to anything, or like there's nothing. I hate when people go in and be like, oh, well, the seller needs to fix that. No, the seller doesn't need to do nothing.
So I guess my question is, do you think the sellers are still in that mindset where it's like? we can hold
I think the
house?
sellers are going to be in that mindset for a little bit until it bites them in the ass.
Yep.
And once they get bit in the ass once, then they're going to start to come to their senses the same way that buyers before weren't leaving. And then it was like, oh, we're okay doing this. We're okay doing this. It's like kind of like treading the water a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think once the sellers start to see it, but I think what we're going to start to see also is that the buyers are going to start to get a little bit more aggressive because there's more inventory out there. So it's not like, oh, I was one of 47. It's like, oh, I was one of 8. I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer.
Yeah.
So they're going to just start, and people have to remember too, that a seller cannot terminate off of inspections. So the buyer can ask for 1,000 things and that, you know,
Yeah, no.
the sire, you can say no, but they can't terminate. So if the buyer's like, oh, we tried, but if they see all of those things again, okay, well, you're gonna have to disclose it to the next person. Do you think like now that we're down to just 8 buyers, that every buyer is gonna look past it? It wasn't like the 47 that we had before.
Yeah.
So I think that it's gonna start to take a little bit of pushing it, but
So there will be more negotiation.
you guys are absolutely gonna start to see more negotiations.
And the other thing is like inspections cost money. So like this buyer spent up to $1,000, so investments have been made. So now both parties want to make this work, right?
Sometimes I always say that to my buyer. I mean, not always. Sometimes, and buyers get, so as an agent, like, I'm very honest with my buyers. Like, if I think they should run, I'm absolutely like, look, I would run. Like,
Start the car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's times that like we haven't even finished inspections. I'm like, look,
Yeah.
this is a money pit. Like, you are going, this is a disaster. So if they put out $1,000 inspections already, they're like, oh, I already paid 1,000. Like, I think, and I'm like, let's just say that you spend $1,000 to dodge a bullet. Like, you just bought peace of mind is what you bought.
And I think that you can help your buyers. Like when I show properties, I beat them up. Everyone I show,
too.
I beat it up. I point out everything bad, everything that's going to come up on a home inspection. I point out the roof is bad, it looks horrible. Well, why doesn't your buyer see that roof looks horrible?
Before it
I
gets
mean,
there, yes.
I see the roof looks horrible, so I say the roof looks horrible, you know?
You learn
and-
these things by going through all your inspections over the
Right.
years.
And then you have the seller disclosure, and they're like, so you have to do a little research. Unknown, they don't know how old the roof is. So then you go back and you look, when was the last time the house sold, right? You read the MLS from when the house sold before, and you find out, did their write-up have anything in it about a new roof or a new heater or anything like that? Because the new owner didn't do it, they don't have to disclose it. So you have to go back and do your research on it before you start asking for things or before you even put an offer together.
Where do you find that information?
I see, so if you go to the MLS, if you're in public records, you can go down to your last MLS, the last time the house sold, and you just click on it and the old MLS will come up. So I say that all the time, like if I look and I'm like, oh, these people have been in the house for 15 years, the roof is at least 15 years old. If these people don't know how old the roof was, it's at least 15 years old at that point.
So that's very big. One thing I'm gonna take from this one.
Yeah.
But what doesn't come up is the previous seller's disclosure.
The previous seller's disclosure does
does
not
not
come up. So I would just say it's at least 15 years old, and that is back to her point on, like, I tell all of my buyers, I'm a love me or hate me agent. I'm going to come in and tell you all of the things that are going to possibly, I don't want to say scare you away, but like while you're looking at those granite countertops and how shiny they are, I'm like, holy shit, that, guys, everyone at home, every time I first just take a shot today, I'm sorry, it's just pouring out of me. I'm like, oh my God, like that's really like, sorry guys, I just literally, or like, oh, there's a leak above here, there's a leak above here, like I'm just calling it out. And then if you're still comfortable going forward, then I'll write it up for you at that point. But at least they're not going in and like, oh, I thought this was okay.
Yeah, and just because I point out something bad or beat up the house doesn't mean that they're not going to buy it. They may still buy the house, but I've done my due diligence and gave them the expectation.
Your job is to educate them, as long as you did your
I
job.
have
then-
a silly question. So like when you go back and you write to the listing agent, do you speak from like the first person? So you like as an agent, or you say you throw it on the buyers, or you say we, like how do you?
Like if I'm negotiating,
Yeah, so for example, I wanted it to see if this was done, or if like my buyers wanted it to see, or we want, like.
it depends on who wants to see it. If I want to see it, if I want to say like, hey, I want to give this to my buyers, like I'm asking for it. If my buyers are like, hey, I want to see this, and I'm like, they're the crazy ones, not me.
Yeah.
It depends on how I'm flipping it, or like, can you send us if like I agree that we need to.
And the other thing is, we're not there yet, but when we're in a buyer's market, you're not going to have the sense of urgency to get an offer on the table ASAP. So, I mean, I showed a house on Saturday morning and we knew we were going to make an offer, and I conveyed that to the listing agent, but there's knob and tube wiring in the house. And so we needed to check out with insurance companies to see if it's insurable. And I conveyed that to the listing agent. He had an open house yesterday. He has no other offers. And I said, well, we are doing an offer, but we're trying to decide, if we can get insurance and, how we're going to approach that in our offer. And, also to start the conversation with him, because if we get the house and they do inspections, which they are, we're going to find the knob and tube, the inspector's going to find it, and then we're going to go back and ask the seller for it. So we already started that conversation before I even put an offer in between the listing agent and myself, and the listing agent and his seller, and me and my buyer. So it's not going to be a surprise to anyone. But we have that luxury when we're not up against someone else. Right.
And how truthful do listing agents supposed to be? Like sometimes when I ask, do you guys have any other realtors? And they say.
There's some agents that never even like, Hold on, go ahead. Finish
No,
that
no,
up.
like,
I was just
can
gonna
I
be really
trust
rude.
them
on
when
that.
they say, yes, I have like multiple offers, or no, they're like, how, well, rarely they say no.
They
Trust nobody.
Trust nobody, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And it
They're
gets,
looking out for their client.
and it gets worse in a buyer's market, right?
Oh,
Because
agreed.
they really need to sell the home. They've had it for 6 months and it's expiring next week.
And now as soon as you call them, they all of a sudden have an offer coming.
Yeah.
I always say it doesn't matter. I tell my clients all the time, it doesn't matter how many offers are on the other side. You do what you're comfortable with. If it wins that for you, it was the house for you. If it doesn't, it wasn't meant to be. Whatever happens, happens. As long as you can sleep at night saying that you did the best to get the house, then that's great. If you lost the house or like, oh, I should have went up 5,000 more, then you should have went up 5,000 more.
That happened to me on my own house.
I had one, we got second place, we lost, we waived inspections, their first time home buyers. The other agent who went back, she went back the next day, to do like another, they waived inspections too, but they went back for a walkthrough the next day, and then they terminated. Because there was a bunch of stuff wrong from construction. The listing agent called me back, and then I called the buyer's agent, I was like, why'd you walk away? And just to look, because otherwise my clients would have been stuck with it.
Yep.
This is because they were hiding stuff. They didn't disclose. So, there
Do
are people out there.
All of your own homework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only trust your people. And even, I don't even trust, like if someone has a, just, inspection, what the whole class is about. If they have an inspection report online, I'm telling my like buyers, like take it with a grain of salt. I don't know who that I don't know if that was the inspector's first day on the job.
Maybe it was my first cousin.
Or from-
Yeah, could have been, yeah, could have been Uncle Joe. You don't know.
The other thing that I do is when I'm on a listing and, you know, or I'm working with a buyer the first time, I tell them that I believe in being fair and honest. I just believe in being fair and honest. That's who I am. And I like a win-win strategy. So if you're a shark, you know, if you want a shark, if you're a shark and you want a shark, we might not be the right match because I believe in being fair and honest.
I say the same thing. I am not, I believe in karma. I'm not gonna ever lie to get a deal done. And I'm not going to deceive somebody to get it done. And like, cause I always say like to like my buyers or even like my sellers, like, I'm not after the money. Like mine's a long-term business. Like I want referral business and to be in the business for 30. I don't want to be in this business for another 30 years, but I don't want to be in any business in 30 years, but down the road. But in this right now, like I'm just looking out for everyone. I'm not, if the other agent wants to, you know, be alcohol and the table. We just want to get you to the table.
And as the market goes to a buyer's age, you know, one thing is you'll get to know agents because you're going to talk to them about everything all the time.
That's when agents actually used to pick up their phones.
Yep. And you also want other agents to like you and want to work with you. And you see that more in a buyer's market. And some agents get real personal when it comes to negotiations and they want to drive you crazy and they call you, they text you. I mean, they're just like all over you. And I say, there's nothing you can do to ruin my day. And there's nothing that you can say or do that's going to make me call my seller and ruin their day or my buyer and ruin their day. So get it together and just come back to us and we will respond. So.
Agreed. I say that all the time with, especially like these listing agents out there right now that don't answer their phone and they're so ignorant to you because you're one of 41 offers and like, you're just like a minion that they don't need you in life. Wait till the market changes.
Yep.
Remember their names. All those people will be treated the same exact way. So I don't care if I'm selling $1 million house, $100,000 house. I don't care if you're one agent or 42 agents on you. I will need you someday. I always talk about relationships with your clients. If you're in a relationship business with your clients and the other agents, you need them just as much as they need you. being an asshole, sorry, God, it just is not going to get you further in this business. Lead with kindness. Well, on this panel, I don't even think we have any like pickles. That I would be like, oh, I wouldn't work with them. No. Now Mickey is all thick, aren't I?
You excited, Sean?
Any question?
Yeah.
He's like, I want to negotiate.
Yeah, and then you'll be waking up in the middle of the night, like laying there in bed, and then all of a sudden you think, oh,
This
yeah,
is my
the light-
strategy.
Yeah, you know, because you're like, you know, because it's getting tough and your buyers want the house or whatever, or, you know, yeah.
Yeah, that is one of the good things about the buyer's market though, is like you have time to think strategy and like you don't have to think on the spot, like right now, like you can sit there and be like, oh, this is how we're gonna make it work. This is what we're doing.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Any questions, guys?
I have many questions.
What about stucco? If you run up on a stucco issue, do you ask the seller to do the repairs, or would you be more comfortable taking a credit for it, like on something like that?
No credit on that. There's too much.
Unknown.
Unless you're changing to like vinyl siding or something like that, but that's a big one. And I never accept the seller's pre-stucco inspection.
Agreed with that. And I don't necessarily do a credit for that also, because with stucco, once they start going, you can open a whole can of worms. So that's something that I want done from an insured, reputable company that we agree upon. But I want that work prior to. Yeah, just because something that can be 10,000 on an inspection quote, when they open it up, now you're at 30 grand.
Yeah. And when it comes to, and that's another reason to look at the previous MLS, because I just noticed my neighbor, their front of their house used to be stucco and it's not stucco anymore. And I thought, oh, they're probably going to sell their house. And you have to wonder, did they side over the stucco? You know, you just don't know. So, and, you know, because.
That's a question on the disclosure, right? So
yeah,
even though it's covered up, it's there. They would have to disclose that.
right.
People have to do a lot of things.
Yeah, I don't, the seller disclosure
Isn't worth the
it
paper it's written on
isn't worth
sometimes.
anything, nothing at all, nothing.
Do your homework, cover your.
Yeah. Yeah. And I still tell every one of my clients that is looking at a stucco house that this is a problem on resale.
And like what to look for, just kind of educate them.
Yep.
And most of the time, my buyers are like, I don't even want to.
Yeah, I talk them out of it. I say relocation buyers can't buy your house. You know, there's just, if it passes now and you go to sell the house in 10 years, it's 10 years older, you know? So now it's your problem. So I pretty much try and talk them out of it.
I have to agree.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you, ladies.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. So I hope you guys learned something on
Thank you.
You're welcome.
making up
Thanks
as
for
we
being
go
here.
Monday.
No, isn't it Wednesday?
Make it Wednesday. They're my usual Wednesday classes. If you ever want to know I don't know what I'm teaching, come in on Wednesday. All right, guys at home, thanks for half listening when our microphone was off.